Whakatakataho ki te uru, whakatakataho ki te tonga. Kia mā kina kina ki uta, kia mā taratara ki tai. E hi a ki ana te atakura, he tio, hi hoka, hi hauhanga, ti hei Māori ora.
Rodney Yeoman, who is a economist that helps support the development of the capacity assessments, and also Mark Stevenson from the Christchurch City Council, just as a support to talk about TA business.
At some stage when it's relevant. Now, in terms of apologies, we don't have any apologies.
No.
We are expecting Robbie, but he might have got a delay by transport issues. In terms of the declarations of interest, which has been an ongoing process, that's been updated with the latest declarations and my decisions there. So that's on the website. And the main purpose of today is that the reporting officers will give us a rundown and update of their response to questions and suggested recommendations. And we will go through that question by question, and there'll be a Q&A process with the panel. So that's the main business. We do need to move and second the receipt of that report. Welcome, Robbie.
Sorry, mate.
That's all good. We're just underway.
I'm happy to move that.
Yes. So what I'll read it out. That the Greater Christchurch Spatial Plan Hearing Panel received a draft Greater Christchurch Spatial Plan Reporting Officer's response to hearing panel questions and submit a hearing presentations. Been moved by Victoria. Do I have a seconder? Gail seconds that. Are we all in agreement? Say aye. Aye. Heads. That's carried unanimously. Thank you. Right. Are there any questions from anyone? I do know Ben's struggling a bit with an ear problem. So we talked before the meeting started, and he said he might struggle like some of the submitters did to hear me. Are you hearing me okay, Ben?
Yeah, it's just here. I can see what you're
Yeah. I can understand it.
Kathy, I wonder, should I just be focused on one? Like, people were struggling hearing me.
It might help if you just
try and direct myself. So to do that, I'm going to have to move across. Does that make any difference? Okay. Yeah. Okay. Well, I'll try and speak up as well. All right. So I think if there's no other questions, we'll move straight to the officer's report to summarise firstly what you've done, Ben, and then we'll go through question by question and answer, do a Q&A with the panel. Just to clarify, we received an update from you, I think yesterday, 14th of November, or was it on Tuesday?
It's Tuesday.
Tuesday. So we've got this one dated 14th of November 2023.
Correct. Sorry, and there was an update just for those couple of minor
Couple of minor
amendments
things.
on Wednesday morning. Sorry, that should have been changed.
Wednesday
to the 15th,
morning,
so the date
was
isn't changed.
yesterday. Yes,
Yeah.
and that covering email highlighted where those changes were. So we've got a record of that as well. Thank you. So let's just get into it. Are there any introductory comments, or should we just take it as read, Ben?
Yeah, that would take it as read. The presentation in front of you will go through has actually got slide by slide, question by question. So I was intending to give a summary of each question.
Yes.
And then enable questions on each one as we went through.
Yes.
So I'll give a little spiel.
Yeah.
We do have supporting officers as well as the reporting officers, some other officers here that can help with some questions. Rodney online around the economics.
Yes.
Emma McCone here from Wakakatahi, who can support transport MRT questions.
Yes.
And I said Mark Stevenson online from a Christchurch TA representative.
Okay, so just go over that again. So we've got Rodney, who can support questions on the housing supply and the commercial land supply and
Correct.
housing assessments. We've got Craig,
Emma
Emma
McCone.
Welcome, Emma.
Yeah. She's not online, so she'll be here in person. We just thought it might be helpful if there are questions that arise specific to MRT and the business case that she's here to help answer those.
Okay.
She supported the in the background, the development, particularly around those questions or those opportunities.
Welcome, Emma. So are you from Christchurch City, or what's your...
Kia ora, I'm Emma McCone. I'm in the spatial system planning team at Waka Kotahi.
Oh,
Yeah.
okay. Yes.
So I've got, I guess, a high level background of the MRT business case and support our team to work with the partnership on transport matters across Christchurch and the country. So hopefully can help with any questions around that.
And what was your surname, Emma?
McCone.
McCone.
Yeah.
Okay. And can you tell me, are you based in Christchurch or?
Yeah.
You're based here. Okay, that's fantastic. Okay, and Mark Stevenson, Mark is here online.
Yes, I am. I'm send apologies that I cannot be there in person today.
Yes. So Mark, what's your role, and are you just listening in, or do you have a role in?
Yeah, I am a manager of planning at Christchurch City Council and have supported the officers that are there present. Janice Carter, planning consultant, has been the author with others in the officers report, but I'm happy to respond to any questions arising during the course of this morning, particularly around business capacity, but other matters no doubt will arise where I can help the panel as well.
Yeah, thank you so much, Mark, for making time, and Emma and Rodney. So we've got a broader team here. Perhaps we'll just cover off the fact that the panel has asked for some legal advice on the legal, I'll call them queries, around MPSUD and FDS matters. Can you just give the panel an update on what's happening there, Ben?
Yes, I think that's specific in relation to question 30. That's underway. We just didn't have it in time to present today, but we will present that back. We'll provide that to the panel, that advice, as well as the information received from MB on their view of the FDS. We'll bundle those together because they do relate and provide that back to the panel for their consumption.
Yeah, just on timing on that, I understand that work's been done by Wynne Williams.
That's correct.
And their target date is 22nd of November. Yeah, that's actually after the day after we reconvene for deliberations. Is there, and we'll all be together on Monday the 21st.
Tuesday the 21st.
Tuesday the 21st?
Yeah.
The meeting on Monday the 20th.
No, that's what I'm saying, sorry.
Right.
we have the panel's meeting on Monday, the 21st, to reconvene our deliberations. 20th? Okay, and the 22nd is therefore, I don't have a diary, sorry.
Wednesday.
Wednesday. Okay.
Noted, I will catching up with the later this afternoon and we'll push to have that ready for Monday.
I know that they'll be struggling for time because they've only recently been briefed. I don't want to. Oh, there's a holiday tomorrow. Okay.
Oh, yeah, you forget about that.
No, they're not a holiday for me. So I've got to go to Kiri tomorrow. Okay, so that does change things. Look, I know the panel would. I think we prefer to have the time taken on that legal opinion and have it received on the 22nd. We can always get together as a panel after our deliberations day on Monday and discuss any issues, I think. And if we need, is it Michelle who's doing the?
That's correct.
Yes.
Michelle Malhop.
Yeah. If we need to talk to her, which we may need to, we'll organise that for a Teams process. Is that okay, panel?
Yeah, that's fine. I suppose after that, after the legal opinion's been given, we'll just have to sort out a date. Wednesday, the 22nd is a full council day.
Yes.
For me.
Yes.
So it'd be a matter of kind of coming up with a time frame that.
I was planning to come down on the 23rd.
On the Thursday.
To work with Liz on the decision recommendation writing, because once we do our deliberations, it's me and Liz who will be sort of crafting and populating the recommendations. So let's just work back through the Secretariat on possible dates, whether there's any time on Thursday we could have an hour to talk to Michelle, or we might need to do some other time. What are people's diaries looking like on Thursday?
If it assists, I can have some flexibility on that Thursday. Wednesday's out for me completely, like Grant, but I can be flexible up until 4 o'clock.
Okay. Well, I think we should do it by teams anyway, because with Kate travelling, it's just for a one-off. So let's through the break, we'll sit down with Kathy and the Secretariat and organise a time. And I'll say now we will get some real value out of talking to Michelle about what she raises in her legal advice to us. So just to clarify for the record, Michelle doesn't have any conflicts of interest in terms of participation in the process. So she's an independent.
She's confirmed that
for the panel. Okay.
no conflicts with the
No
process.
conflicts. That's great. Excellent. Thanks for arranging that. Yes.
Can I just ask a query? Have we got a copy of the presentation?
Don't think so yet, but it can be circulated relatively easily.
Just circulated. I prefer to see it on my screen and look at you at the same time as you're presenting, rather than having my back to you.
Yeah.
If that's possible from the Secretariat.
So Kathy, you're going to be able to circulate that now. Yeah.
Just trying to do it now, yeah.
Yep. Thank you.
So should we just pause while it's done, or let's just get underway. Thank you, Ben.
I want to touch on this. I'll just kind of summarize the process here. So we've got obviously the officer reports come out with answers to the questions, and we've framed that in order, rather than the order of the numeric order of the questions, we've framed it by theme that related to the officer's report, and this presentation follows that approach mostly. We do start off with the MPS slide questions, capacity assessment and FDS, because Rodney's available now, but he'll have to leave by 10 o'clock. So he'll speak to some of his attachment A, and here to answer any questions. So just starting off with the housing development capacity assessment, which related to question 30 around the what's the response to the economic peer review provided by one of the submitters and the views from an economist. In that answering that officer's response to that, the NPSUD must be informed by the most recent applicable HBCA, but also obviously feedback from engagement and consultation. The FDS was informed by that Greater Christchurch Housing Development Capacity Assessment in March 23. The March 23 version, it was an updated version from one completed in July 21. It was updated to reflect the amendments made to the NPS 2020 in the middle of 2022. The updated NPSUD was the really minor change really was to reflect the Enabling Housing Act provisions. It did not require any changes to the capacity housing assessment methodology and the approach that we'd taken leading into July 21. In relation to that initial 21 version, MFE appointed Principal Economics to peer review that document, and it concluded that it was comprehensive and meeting the requirements of the NPS UD 2020. The most recent March version, we did not feel we needed to get peer reviewed as there was no changes to the methodology required in the NPSUD. The initial review still stood. The changes made were largely updated capacity based around the increased supply brought on by Enabling Housing Act. So the approach and the methodology assumptions things still stood. Officers are still satisfied that the capacity assessment meets the requirements of the NPSUD. And as mentioned, we've got Rodney from Formative Limited here who supported the development of the capacity assessment, who's able to speak to, at this stage, questions 30, his answer to that in Appendix A, and we can take any questions. So maybe before that, I can hand over to Rodney.
Yes, before we go, welcome Rodney.
Thank you.
I'd just like to orientate the panel to where we're up to. So we started out of order in the staff report. We're at page 16 of the report back, and we're dealing with question 30. And also there's an appendix with Rodney's memo from Rodney too. I'm just trying to find that. I read it on my phone coming down. Can we just point us to where that is in our bundle?
It's Appendix A to the
Appendix A.
Appendix A to the.
Sorry, and I'll try and keep the people.
Yes, no, here it is here. So it's dated 13th of August 2023. That can't be right. Have you got your memo there, Rodney?
Yeah, apologies. That should have been the November. Should change that date.
So if we cross out the 8th and put what date?
So 13th of November 2023.
So if the panel could cross out 1308 and put in 1311 2023 on your versions.
Correct.
All right, so we've got, I suppose, three aids to this discussion. One is the Q&A on page 16. The second is the 4-page memo from Rodney. And the third is the summary bullet points in front of us. So Rodney, do you want to just tell us anything additional or highlights from you? Because the reason we've asked this is the day before we received, might have been the day off, we received submissions from a number of the submitters. This document by Fraser Colgrave was tabled with us and we certainly didn't have time to read it before questioning him. We felt we needed to have someone else look at it on our behalf, particularly you who've been involved in the previous information, and just give us your view.
Yep.
The nature of, I suppose, evidence of how you've worked through it and what your advice to the panel is.
Yep, no, I'm happy to do that. So just briefly, obviously my name's Rodney Yeoman. I'm a director of Formative Limited, and I have 20 years experience doing this sort of analysis. In terms of MPSUD assessments, I've done residential demand and capacity assessments across the country. And most relevant for the panel is I've done the work that sits behind the Selwyn and Waimakariri District Council assessments, which feeds into the housing capacity assessment and sits within the draft spatial plan for those two districts. For the greater Christchurch partnership, I also did the housing affordability assessment for the outcomes under the different spatial plan scenario options. And then finally for Christchurch, I've done a number of plan changes for Christchurch City Council where I've reviewed and used their capacity assessments. So that just gives you a brief background of my my history, I suppose, in terms of doing this type of work. Now, in terms of this particular question for question 30, Mr. Colgrave's evidence and report, I've focused on the residential demand and capacity questions which he raises. And in terms of that, at a high level, Mr. Colgrave is concerned that the spatial plan does not provide enough capacity in greenfield locations to meet the expected demand for standalone houses, primarily around the edge of Christchurch. So the basis of that is on his assessment of demand and supply, which I'll go through quickly. So in terms of demand, he looked at the demand that has occurred over the last 5 years and found that 35% of new dwellings were attached over that period. And he considers that in order for the development pattern in the spatial plan to be achieved, that you'd need 61% of new dwellings to be attached. And in his view, that was what he said, highly unlikely or a quantum shift. And therefore, in his opinion, he believes that there wasn't enough greenfield land provided for additional standalone houses. So in response, my review, briefly, I looked at the recent development activity that's occurred over the last 12 months. And in the greater Christchurch urban environment, 58% of new dwellings were attached. And this compares to 35% being attached in 2021 and only 20% or less post-earthquake. So what we've seen there is a change over 10 years from that 20% being attached to then 35% and now 58%. So it's a consistent trend towards more housing being supplied as attached than standalone.
So you outlined, Rodney, on page 3, paragraph 3 on that page is where you summarise that information?
Yes, page 3, that's the second paragraph there and third paragraph as well.
Yes, okay.
So that's it in terms of the demand side. In terms of, I disagree with Mr. Colgrave's concerns. It's reasonable for the Greater Christchurch Partnership to plan for this eventuality. Broadly, I consider that Mr. Colgrave's concerns, which he lays out later in his report around competition and affordability, etc., they all stem from his belief that only a small share, 35%, of dwellings will be attached in the long term. We've already reached 58%, in that area, and it's likely to trend further from there. For the supply side, he also raises some concerns where he's concerned about the amount of capacity in the greenfields, and also the intensification in Christchurch and a lesser extent Waimakariri. So I've looked at his points, and I consider that the spatial plan and the capacity modelling is conservative for the long run. A key example, and there are other examples, but I'll just use this key example, which is that Mr. Colgrave correctly acknowledges in his evidence, and I'm quoting here, that a higher proportion of plan-enabled capacity is usually deemed feasible over the long term. So that's end quote. So this is important because the Christchurch City Council capacity model only assesses current feasibility, what capacity is currently feasible today under today's conditions, given the prices and the build costs. It doesn't assess the long-term feasible capacity. What is feasible as things change in the market over time? Generally, in a high growth economy, you're going to see feasibility improving through time. Now, there will be ups and downs, obviously, but over that 30-year time period that we're talking, it's very likely that feasibility will improve, and that's what Mr. Colgrave agrees to. So in my opinion, this means that the estimate of capacity shown in the spatial plan is likely to be conservative.
Where are you in your memo when you're summarising this point?
This point will be it is on page 4, the
Yes.
third paragraph.
The big long paragraph starting with first for Christchurch.
Yes, so it's a long paragraph, unfortunately. I should have split it up.
Yes.
Yes. So if you're looking at the kind of second half of it, I've said, while I understand CCC has commissioned detailed commercial feasibility in the future, which means the assessment is likely, has not commissioned detailed modelling of commercial feasibility in the future, which means that their assessment is likely to be conservative, i.e. I consider that it's likely that more capacity will be commercially feasible in the medium term and in the long term than shown in the DSP or the draft spatial plan.
And so I've underlined those statements.
Yep.
So what's that opinion? What's your opinion based on, Rodney?
So it's an assessment of what has occurred across all the tier 1 urban environments over the course of the last 30 years. You've seen a consistent improvement of the commercial feasibility. Generally, what you've seen is, first off, you start with, okay, it's affordable and feasible to build a standalone dwelling in a location. And as time moves on, the dwelling depreciates in value and the value of the land uplifts. And what you'll see is that then makes it feasible for intensification to occur. It becomes less viable to maintain that standalone house in that market. Eventually what will happen is that the developer will buy up that house and they'll build 2 houses on there. And then through time, that then changes to attached houses. So, single level units. And then over time, that's changed to multi-unit terraced houses. And then further, we're now starting to see apartments being developed. Obviously, in the next 30 years, that will continue and we'll see more of that density becoming more viable over time. So that's what that's based on. It is a commonly accepted process, and that's what Mr. Colgrave also agrees to. And he questions, why does the table 2, I believe it is, in the spatial plan. Why does it have the same feasible capacity in the medium term as the long term for Christchurch? It has that same 94,000 capacity, and it's because they're not assessing that change in the market, which is very likely to occur.
So why wouldn't the spatial plan have the advice that, or even some note that it's conservative? What's the reason why it doesn't provide that explanation you've just provided us with, Rodney?
Given the length of the document, I suspect it's hard to get every single element within the document. But yes, I think maybe it could have a discussion. What you can see in table 2 is that the feasibility changes for Waimak and Selwyn through time, but not for Christchurch. And I think.
Yeah. Sorry to interrupt. I'm just trying to find table 2. Can someone give me a page number? 69. Okay, so it's right towards the back. I found table 1 at the front, so it's 69. I can't see table 2. I'm looking at the version attached to the updated version attached to the report.
Oh, that will be a different page number then, Simon.
Yes.
Hold on, just bear with me.
It's page 69 of the
off the notified draft. Yeah, I don't have that in front of me. What I do have is the officer's report. We've got it on screen here. So 62. Okay. All right, we found table 2. So just talk to me again about this, Rodney.
So what this table is showing you is 6 columns of data. The first 2 columns are the feasible capacity. So that's what is developable by the commercial market. And so in the medium term, what we have to do in MPSUD is hold all structures within the economy fixed. We have to say the price points are the same as today, the costs are the same as today, and this is what is feasible right now today. For the long term, the MPSUD says that you're allowed to undertake an assessment of future feasibility where you allow the prices to change and the cost structures to change. And generally, as Mr. Colgrave has stated, what you'll see is that there will be an improvement in feasibility in the long term. There'll be a larger number in that second column. And that's what you see for Waimakere and Selwyn, but not for Christchurch. So for Christchurch, it's 94,000 and 94,000. Obviously, that's a large number compared to the demand in the next 2 columns. And therefore, I wasn't the one who did the modelling for Christchurch, but I suspect they probably felt there was so much capacity, there was no, it's conservative not to model that long term.
Okay.
But yeah, the number would be considerably higher in that 94,000, and then your long-term additional capacity would be, the shortfall or the surplus would be much higher.
Okay, I'm following that. Panel, do you have any questions? Kate?
Can I ask whether or not that 94,000 figure included the medium density residential standards?
Yes, so it does include the MDRS. However, one thing that it doesn't include, and this is the same for Waimak and Selwyn, it doesn't include the intensification in the commercial zones. It doesn't model residential capacity that could be achieved, as an example for Christchurch, within that the CBD zones. So again, that's another conservative stance. The numbers are likely to be important, but unlikely to change the outcome. There's still sufficient surplus.
Grant?
Thanks, Rodney. My query was to do with your page 3, paragraph 3, and the numbers of likely increases in the trend for attached housing. I'm interested in the demographic. You're suggesting that the attached housing scenario might increase, but I'm just wondering in terms of, is it going to increase for, and I'm sort of related to what Kate's query about the medium density, the people who occupy the attached dwellings, because the ones that are built seem to be quite, 1 or 2 bedrooms rather than family homes. Do you see a difference in the long term, medium term of a change, a shift away from the smaller attached units to multi-unit accommodation?
Yes, there is definitely a trend, but it's not to say that everyone is going to live in these types of dwellings. There is still a need for other types of larger dwellings. You do still get, in terms of attached dwellings, 3-4 bedroom dwellings, which can accommodate a family quite comfortably, with a small backyard. So it's not that this is all just 1 bedroom small apartments. There is quite a bit of other. It's a broad range of options. Really, what's happening here is previously the market was providing predominantly only standalone dwellings, and it's shifted towards providing a broader range of options for the community. And we've seen that across the country in all the urban environments. There is a consistent trend. It's not a one-off, and it's not specific to Christchurch. This is something that will continue, in my opinion.
Just supplementary to that. So because of that trend, is the inference that there will be the demand for greenfield site for family homes will diminish as the density and the change to a higher density, but still a family home situation in urban areas? Is that likely to happen?
Yes. No, I think it's very likely to happen. So obviously you've still got a large chunk of the dwelling stock currently today is what you're still going to have in 30 years' time anyway. So there is still a lot of supply of standalone family homes within Christchurch urban area, even once we have the intensification occurring. So people will still be able to choose that if they have the ability to afford it. But these new standalone houses, attached houses, townhouses, are allowing people to buy into areas which they wouldn't have been able to buy into previously, and live closer to where they want to live.
Sorry, just
final
question.
Just carry on.
The definition, I'm not sure, the definition of what's meant by long term and medium term, is medium term out to 2050 or what?
It's 10 years is medium term. So taking from, in this case, in the tables, I think it starts from 2022. So that would take you up to 2032. And then long term will take you out to 2052.
Yes. Victoria?
Kia ora, Rodney.
Got it.
My name is Victoria. I just wanted you to touch on the price point, if you can. I picked up that you said that people who will now be able to afford to move, in some areas that they wouldn't have been able to live in. You're assuming that these multi-unit dwellings, the price points are going to be lower. I mean, we're not seeing that with these higher spec developments that are coming on in the inner city. I just wondered whether you could touch on that price point issue.
No. Yeah, that's a good point. So definitely in your CBDs, what you tend to see is that those higher price point, in terms of trying to target people who want, Italian marble kitchens and that sort of stuff. Obviously not affordable. But what you're also seeing is a supply of not only commercial attached dwellings, which will be more affordable, but also public and semi-public or semi-commercial providers providing dwellings which are also more affordable. What you have in terms of the attached dwellings is that the amount of land that you have for each dwelling is obviously smaller, but also generally the actual amount of floor space in each dwelling is smaller. So that combined, those two reductions allow you to have a dwelling which is lower cost to provide, and you can have a more affordable house. Having said that, though, I don't believe that the district or the spatial plan will be a silver bullet. It's providing opportunities in the market for providing housing. It's not going to mean that housing will be definitely more affordable. In my opinion, it's really those non-private, so that's Kāinga Ora, and semi-commercial who will be providing the more affordable housing. But having said that, in terms of commercial providers, I consider that they will be able to provide a more affordable dwelling via intensification than standalone greenfield.
Yeah, I suppose my comment to that is it works in theory, but we're not seeing it yet.
So yeah, in terms of the data that I've viewed, it is starting to happen. But you are correct, there is going to be, in terms of especially the CBD, I think you're going to still see very high end for a while. But in terms of those outer suburbs, as you move out, you will start to see that happening.
Thank you.
So Rodney, you mentioned the data. Is this just a forecast without data, or is this the trends are changing? Because I think the question, Victoria's in Christchurch City, she lives in, I think, a member for Papanui in terms of the city council. Is that just a trend forecast?
Yeah, so at the moment, the actual data for the last 12 months shows you 58% of dwellings were attached.
Yes.
So that's what actually happened. And that changed from 35% 2 years ago and 20% roughly 10 years ago.
Yeah.
What we've seen around the country in terms of bigger urban environments, in Auckland and also in Australia, is that as the urban environment grows, that share increases. And so what I'm saying here is I'm very confident that you're going to get more than 61%, which is what you need over that coming 30 years. In fact, I think it's going to happen in the next 5 years. It's very likely, in my opinion, you will hit that or exceed it. It is still a forecast. There is still uncertainty there, but given the available information, I think it's highly likely.
Rodney, perhaps focus on the question, which was around cost, not volume. So I was asking about data. You mentioned there were data.
Sorry.
Seeing that there might be some cost leveling out. Victoria's question was asked about cost and affordability, not volume of.
Apologies. Sorry, I thought that's what the question was. So you're asking about the build costs.
Yes.
Right. Yep. So yes, there is expected to be a leveling out of the build cost inflation. So there has been a higher rate of inflation recently, which is well recorded in the media.
Yes.
But over a long period, if you look back through the data, there's been a consistent trend of growth in build costs, and it's much lower than what has been over the last few years. So yeah, that is a trend which is used to forecast the growth forward.
So is that trend available, or is there any report or data? Is it just your
Yeah,
your
so
opinion?
in terms of Christchurch City, they don't do that, obviously.
Yes.
They've kept their feasibility the same at current price.
Yes.
In terms of Waimakere and Selwyn, it will be within the back end of the housing capacity assessment.
Okay, so we could look at that. Okay, so in your panel, I'm just rolling along here. Certainly, in your response, I think you quote a couple of pieces of evidence in a footnote. I'll just have to find that again. John Scallon and
Yep.
Ruth Allen. Can you tell me who they are and what they're telling us in that evidence?
Yeah, so John Scallon is an officer from Christchurch City Council.
Yes.
He undertakes the capacity assessment for Christchurch. So that 94,000 is his calculation.
All right.
That piece of evidence in particular, that is related to PC 14.
Yes,
So
understand.
he has, oh, sorry.
Understand. Yep, carry on.
Yeah, so in that evidence, he looks at the different qualifying matters that are going to apply and calculates the impacts on the amount of capacity. In terms of the second piece, Ruth Allen, she works for a consultancy called the Property Group, and her report is quoted by Mr. Colgrave in his statement or report. She has undertaken an assessment in that statement around the feasibility of apartments in the areas around the key commercial areas in Christchurch. And in that, she's established when and where those apartments will become feasible.
Okay. Thank you for that, bringing that to our attention. Victoria?
Can I just take you back to that 58% that we were talking about before? Does the data show it down to suburb, or is it just citywide?
Yes, it does have down to what we call statistical area 2s, which is not quite suburb, but yes, yep.
Okay, thank you.
Grant?
I was just going, in terms of affordability and feasibility, there seems to be varying opinion from developers about the cost benefit of going to a greenfield site versus the complexity of a brownfield site. And I kind of, did you do any work in assessing this about the cost of infrastructure for a greenfield site and how that impacted on the price of those dwellings versus the potential relationship between building in a brownfield site and tapping into an infrastructure that's predominantly there already? Is that going to be a factor in the future change that you talk about?
Yeah, so the modelling does have for greenfield a calculation of the infrastructure that the developer provides, but not what the council provides. It does include a DC, the development contribution, which the developer pays to cover the infrastructure that council provides, but whether or not that DC does actually cover all the infrastructure that council provides or not, yeah, that's debatable. So that's first off, that point does include the infrastructure that the developer provides. For the brownfield sites, you obviously don't have to do that level of infrastructure. So there is a lower cost, or they don't have to cover that cost because it's already been provided, you know, the roads and the different parks and things like that in the area. So yes, there is a difference in that cost structure, which will mean that there is a difference between the price of the land effectively, that in terms of getting land ready for development. In my view, the real issue really is more about council. The cost of servicing greenfield sites for council is higher than servicing brownfield sites generally. And so it's more of a community issue in my mind about if we can provide more for growth within the existing network of infrastructure, we'll have a better outcome than allowing more greenfield. Hopefully that answered your question.
Yeah, it does. Thank you very much.
Yeah. Thank you. I've got two final questions. Are there any other questions from the panel? Okay. So firstly, just going back to your page 3 and the two middle paragraphs there that we can see, there's quite, Mr. Colgrave uses a 5-year period where you're focusing on the latest 12 months, which really shows this big jump up. Is there any way you can rationalize why you're so far apart in your opinions?
Honestly, I don't know why he hasn't looked at that point. Like, I suppose it's just been consistent. The 35% is something from so long ago now, and the trend has been consistently moving forward. I just don't understand why he wouldn't have looked to see what the trend was rather than taking an average over a period. It hides, taking an average over a period hides what's actually happening over that period. So yeah, that's
Thank you for that answer, Rodney. Could we then go to page 62 of the officer's second revision of the spatial plan and look at table 2 again?
Yep.
I'll just wait for while Kathy brings that up. Here we go. Now, given the way the table's developed, and your explanation of why the 94,000 stays the same in both medium and long term, do you think that a clarification sentence about that, explaining when people are reading this for the first time, because we've spent a lot of time and effort trying to get to the bottom of that, and this document's going to last a while, do you think some sort of explanation, brief explanation of that would assist the spatial plan?
Yes, no, I think so. Just that, even a footnote just saying that, you know, for Christchurch, the capacity assessment is only considered what's currently feasible, and that in the future, the market will change. It has to change. Everyone knows that. Yeah, the long-term number is likely to be higher than what is shown on the table.
Yes, I wonder, Rodney, if you could work with Ben and the team to craft some words with some consideration between you and the planners about what that wording might be as a recommendation to us.
Yep, happy to do that.
Thank you. I know you're off at 10. Is Rodney germane to these other questions, Ben?
Just the next one.
Next one. Should we go to that now? Yeah.
Just relating to, I see on that there's a difference in figure 9 than on the original on page 69. It's a little bit of a different. Yeah, the graph. Sorry, the graph in figure 9 it reads differently to the draft document. I'm just wondering if someone could explain what's happening there in terms of the Greater Christchurch area. It's no longer showing district plan rezoning requests.
I don't think that's a question for me.
No.
Cool.
So Ben, can you respond or check that out and respond after?
So this is
The officers' marked up version.
The officers' report, page 62, shows the right-hand bar being all blue, whereas the page 69 on the draft has a bit of a red bit at the top.
Yeah, that's just the plan changes I think have been approved.
Right.
So initially, when the draft was circulated, the plan changes that were in that red were in train. They then we had decisions made on them.
Okay. Is that a footnote type thing too? That
Well, I don't think we need to. It's just the change in information and facts between the draft and what we can recommend. So I'm happy to not to footnote that. Otherwise, it's a current. So can we now go to the next question? It's about business development capacity. Question 27. Is that Ben? Do you want to introduce this or
that's that's page 17 of the officers' report.
Yes,
it's out of order. Question 27 was there were some points made by a submitter around the accuracy of the commercial supply figures. The figures included in the business capacity assessment took account of vacant and partially vacant land in Christchurch City, and it's recognised that further work is needed because there's no account of that redevelopment potential nor additional capacity enabled by Plan Change 14, which the city has engaged Formative, Rodney, to look into, and I'll just pass to him because time is of the essence to maybe give a quick update on that.
I don't think I have too much to add. You have read my memo, I think. So
yes.
I think I'll just take questions instead. Is that okay, given the time?
Sure. So we'll look at your memo, and can we just home in on the key paragraph here, Rodney?
Yep. So the key paragraph really is on page
1, is it?
Yeah, page 1. So just a quick summary is that Adele Radburn presented for Christchurch, New Zealand, stating that the shortfall indicated in the DPS for the commercial zones, and that's table 4, I think, of 110 hectares is in her view overstated, and that's because it doesn't take into account redevelopment potential enabled by PC 14. Now, PC 14 is allowing much higher heights across the commercial zones, which will mean the redevelopment potential in those areas is much higher. So just very quickly, the next 2 paragraphs basically say that I agree that it would allow a considerable amount of extra capacity and that it may well offset all of that potential shortage. However, we're still undertaking the work right now. So happy to take questions.
Yes. Rodney, one question from me. Given that this information is imminent and that this spatial plan is looking ahead for 30 years, Is there anything you recommend we provide in the spatial plan today to take account of your conclusions you've made in your memo?
Maybe again, it's a footnote to note that Plan Change 14 is currently underway or being heard, and that the council is required to provide a lot more redevelopment potential, which is likely to offset the shortage, and that this is being investigated, or some words to that effect.
But that's required by the NPSUD?
So the assessment?
No, the requirement to provide for the land.
Yes, correct. Yeah, so it's required by the NPSUD, but also the Housing Supply Enabling Act.
And that has been provided in what's been notified in Plan Change 14?
Yes, yep.
Okay, well, I think certainly for me anyway, I'd like some advice between you and the officers about just capturing the fact that that says notified, and maybe some information appropriately framed about, because it seems to be that you're on course. You're aligned with Ms. Radburn in terms of your opinion.
Yes, yep, that's correct.
And that opinion informs us, so I think it would be something that would be quite helpful to understand what you might add in as a sentence or two to capture that.
Yep, no, that's correct. So I can
Okay.
work on that.
Thank you. Any other questions, panel? Thank you very much, Rodney. That's been super helpful, and for your sort of short turnaround on your memo too.
Appreciate that, and thank you, and I'll sign off if that's okay.
Thank you.
You guys have a good day.
Thank you.
Just before moving on to the next slide, just reiterate the point on the previous one that the capacity assessment, that FDS has been informed by that latest capacity assessment, which has been peer reviewed by MFE in terms of the methodology. The input and things do change over time, and it's recognised that these things will be iterative and will change. And it's one of the recommendations not to change the spatial plan, but for the partnership, and the officer's report is getting in early and having more of that engagement with developer community in the housing capacity assessment to help inform that. So these things that will hopefully get better over time.
Look, I understand that, Ben. It seems to be, on this point about the commercial land, seems to be an accepted position from the submitter. I know that ideally we need to wait for this information to come through. So it's a judgment call about whether we signal that likelihood or not.
Oh, no, I agree with that. Just as more general, the capacity assessment is acknowledge that there is work coming through that will change that.
There always is in the policy space. It's a
I'll just add that the officers have made a recommendation, not to the spatial plan itself, but about the further work signaled at the end of the housing capacity assessment to be done, which includes one housing capacity assessment for Greater Christchurch with that similar methodology.
Okay.
That's obviously affected the methodology for that commercial supply. Yes. And it's also affected that methodology where Waimakariri and Selwyn have taken the opportunity for long-term feasibility to make those reasonable adjustments to that cost-revenue relationship, where Christchurch City Council haven't which is more conservative. So part of that recommendation would support that a unified methodology.
Is that in the implementation section, or is that just outside anything in the spatial plan, what you've just described?
Do you want to go? Let me go. Yeah, it's a recommendation to the partnership, like Ben said, to work with the development sector, infrastructure providers, and to take the initiative to advance that further work signalled in the capacity assessment. But it's not a recommendation to the spatial plan itself, so it's not a change in that joint work programme. But there is some words in the spatial plan to put the partnership to consider that work going forward.
the capacity assessment and its continued improvement and updating the timing of it doesn't need to be in the work program because it's legislative for the NPSUD that we must do it. So, and indicating each time those improvements that can be made with the information.
Thank you. We're on to question 28 now, is that right?
Yes, which is page 24 of the officer's report. And that does relate quite closely to question 33, which will be on the next slide, which is page 25 of the officer's report. I'll go through this first one here. So the question 28 is around, does the FDS comply? There were some questions raised around that, and there's a point there on legal advice, which we touched on earlier. In terms of the officer's response to this question, it's officers consider that the draft spatial plan does give effect to the objectives and policies of the NPS as an FDS, future development strategy. The primary challenge to compliance heard from the submitters was that there's no spatial identification of board locations for future urban areas to provide that housing capacity over the long term. Locations for greater intensification and development are identified by board areas, generally in the yellow areas around PT routes and centres. And although there's the next slide will sorry touch on more on the differences between the sort of intensification board location and the more specific future urban development areas, but those areas are also identified for longer-term growth in terms of greenfield. And although there's insufficient development capacity in the long term, particularly in Selwyn, it does not mean that there has to be responded by expansion, future urban areas. It can be met through alternate means, which the spatial plan recommends is intensification and increasing the feasibility of that. And there's parts of the recommendations in terms of the joint work program to have the focus around that. The PDAs will also seek to bring along that as well. So officers' view ultimately is it does give effect to the FDS and does show, maybe I'll go to the next slide, the relevant areas. I'll just touch on this because and again go to questions because they are quite related. So question 33, what is the difference in sort of how they've been identified in the spatial plan? Officers of the opinion that maps 2 and 14 do spatially identify the board locations for housing business capacity. There's not a difference in how industrial and residential have been identified, in that they are broad. Residential intensification, there is a slight difference in terms of the greenfield future urban areas. The future urban areas for residential are more cadastral than the board areas, and they've been progressed through plan changes or identified in RMA planning documents, and to show them broadly would be misleading as to their accuracy. There's sufficient land within those areas to provide for that long-term capacity. The level of detail for a future development strategy should be sufficient to identify future urban environments and intensification opportunities to reflect the level in the capacity assessment, which officers feel that's done. It's at a district and to some places township basis, which we then reflect into our spatial plans here. So if you're looking at like Rolleston, you can see the broad locations around intensification and other development growth around the centres and down PT routes in the orange. You've got broad locations for industrial. And then the green hashed areas, that longer term capacity for future urban growth, acknowledging some of that has been very recently zoned, and but it still does provide those areas for further expansion, which is sufficient. And again, shown as future urban development areas with a cadastral boundary because we have that information and that accuracy.
Just to give a note that Miss Ashton's, some of her submitters is what I have put forward as some of my conflicts potentially.
Yes, so
it's just broad conversation, but
yes, so look, Nicole has declared some potential conflicts around her participation in zoning hearings at Selwyn District, and has been rightfully quite cautious about that. This, in my view, is a general spatial plan wide question, not specifically targeted at any particular location. So I'm very comfortable myself for Nicole to stay at the table and be involved in Q&A on this. I think the panel's all agreeing with that. We are being very cautious about identifying those potentials, and it's my role as chair to work out how we manage those. So being upfront about that's important, but we're dealing with a general question across the spatial plan about how Greenfield is being shown or not, and in comparison to how the more, let's say, general purple ellipses are shown for industrial. So Ben, I'll kick off with a question for you on this one and the staff. You agree that there is a different method you've used to identify new residential areas as opposed to industrial locations?
Yeah, for greenfield expansion, yes, it's taking a future urban development area approach rather than sort of broad location.
Yes, I'm a little troubled personally about the green belt identification, and I know there's words around saying, look, this is schematic, or but I know around and I'm only using Wollaston as an example because it's come up in evidence that some of the lesser quality soils are in the area that the green belt's shown in. Is there a danger, do you think, that in reading and having regard to the spatial plan when it's finally approved, that lawyers, planners, developers are going to look at the area between the green belt dots and what's shown and say, well, that space is obviously available, and that's a leg up for developments in those areas?
Yeah, I think if they take that quite literally, that would be the case. I mean, it is somewhat intended that it's pulled back from the urban area because there will be some expansion in some places, and that it's not going in the longer term, beyond 30 years, not to forego greenfield. But yeah, if that would be the case, they could make that argument. I think we'd just point to the fact that it is just an indicative, stylized point, that those things have to be, as we talked about in our recommendation, the detail of what that looks like in policy still has to be worked through. In the interim, while there is no direction in that could be an argument someone would run.
Nicole.
I was just going to wonder, do we actually have anything currently written in the spatial plan saying that?
About the green belts?
No, just about generally with the, figuratively where things are at the moment when we're talking about those maps, just generally.
Maybe a clarification.
Yeah, I just pointed to, how do you mean that they are stylized, that it's conceptual? Is it?
I've certainly read something about the green. Yeah,
the green belt does have that. We've added that in, and it talks about in the of support and in the spatial plan around the work that will have to happen forward. It's just an indication at the moment.
Perhaps it would help to go there in the document, so if officers can help us with where the explanation of the schematic nature of the green belts, because I definitely read something about the fact that they are not precise or need to be. There is some narrative context about that.
Yeah. So in the actual notified version, section 3.5, page 65. So section 3.5, para 2.
Just as a just to keep us on track, Ben, I think we're better to be really focusing on your recommendation version, because when we're looking at responses like this, we'll just need to double check that there haven't been any changes around that. So that's why I'm focusing on your second revision attached with this document. And so page 58. Kathy, we could find page 58 of the council recommendation version.
It's just the bottom two sentences of page 58.
So the bottom sentence or bottom two?
Yes, apologies, bottom sentence.
Robbie.
Sorry to be a nuisance. I just want to go back a tiny bit. That map on 24, does that include the Sparks, the green hash? Does that include the Sparks Farm submission?
Is this map 14, Robbie?
I don't know what map it is.
2 and 14.
Is that one?
Are 2 and 14 the same?
Very, very close. That 2 just shows a bit more growth in terms around the centres.
Okay.
And intensification.
So does it include the Spark submission, that green hash? Raymond, do you know?
What's the Sparks? Sparks
Which is East Rangiora. So I can see an area there, but I don't know that it includes the Sparks Farm, which they offered for development.
I can answer that one, Ben. It includes the area north of Boys Road, but not south, because that's the area that's identified in the map A of the RPS as a feeder.
So is the district plan dealing with that?
Yes, it is. The rezoning hearings for that are in May, and they have put a submission in.
All right. Eastern Link, have we considered the Eastern Link? Because politically, I think we're going to vote in favour of that for the LTP.
In the spatial plan, that's not shown. I don't see how the spatial plan would prevent that from going forward.
All right. All good. Sorry.
No, good question. I've got to follow up on that. Are you on the same subject, Victoria? Okay. So can we just home in on Rangiora, please?
Sorry, what are you asking me to do?
Could you blow up the plan?
Well, this one that's on the screen.
Yes, so we can look more closely at the Rangiora area. Okay. So the eastern corridor that's shown in the proposed district plan, correct? We were looking at that with Liz, I think. Someone was getting some more information about where that was. It might have been Grant.
Sorry, I was trying to locate this plan on what page on the officer's report?
74.
74.
No. Okay, map 2. So can we just clarify the differences between map 2 and map 14?
So they're very, very similar. Map 14 just indicating those areas of focus beyond 700,000 people or 30 years. And primarily that's increased intensification along PT routes in the Christchurch City. There is some additional industrial blobs as well, but that's primarily the difference.
So this is map 14 is 700,000 people.
That's correct.
That's correct. It also represents the FDS.
FDS. Okay.
Map 14 is the FDS component of the spatial plan as well,
Okay,
whereas map 2 looks out longer. So the capacity assessment and all of that information is the long term, the next 30 years. So just to bear in mind, that's the other difference between map 2. It's looking at beyond what's required of an FDS and the MPSUD.
Okay, well, look, whether it's map 2 or map 14 doesn't matter for the moment for my question. In terms of intensification around transport routes, I saw in the is the blue line, is that the current state highway? Is that
It'll be the
core public transport route?
Yeah, I think the state
Rangiora Oxford.
I think the state highway actually ends before Rangiora, but it's the core route and main route into Rangiora.
And the Eastern Arterial is on the right-hand side looking at this plan.
Yes, Rachel, if you want to jump in on these.
Yes, that's correct.
specific ones.
It's to the right-hand side of the core public transport route that's shown there in the blue.
Okay, so in terms of intensification, it's around centres and core transport routes. Why isn't the intensification shown on this spatial plan around the core transport routes as it is in some of the other plans?
I think that is that correct. Run up on the page. There's map 14. So the map 2, yeah. So map 2 does show additional intensification coming down that blue route south of that centre.
Okay.
So that's the focus in the 30 years, 700,000 people is that map 14. It's a bit more concise, and then going up to 1 million, we should have indicated, well, the next phase would be along those routes.
So I'm really struggling to find map 2. So what page? In
24.
24. Okay, got it. So map 14's got this heading: broad locations of housing and business development capacity 70,000 people, 700,000 people. What should be the title of map 2? Because it doesn't seem to have a title. Previous title.
Sorry,
okay.
Because of lots of additions of the
all right,
officers' amendments, its pages have fallen away.
Greater Christchurch Spatial Strategy, 1 million people. And the key differences are you've highlighted further growth opportunities around the major transport routes between the two plans. That's the difference.
That is the primary difference, yes.
Okay. But
those hashed green lines, that's what you're talking about now?
No, I'm looking at the orangey.
Oh, the orangey, okay.
Yes. And what my question was, if there's an Eastern Arterial that's identified as a significant transport route, whatever the term is, should that orange be expanded?
So I'm not sure exactly where that in the process, the approval, otherwise it sounds like it's close of that arterial route.
Yes.
And what the purpose of it is to move people around the township, then it's not potentially a focus for growth.
Okay. Well, just to clarify, Southbrook, it's got 26,000 vehicle movements. It clogs up. Hence, I was late today.
Yes.
So we're not calling it an arterial.
Okay.
We're calling it a link. Eastern Link.
Yes.
Where you can see that we diverge where the railway line hits the road.
Yes.
It's going to go out to the east and link up with Kippenberger Ave.
Yes.
And we've already put some designations in for the properties.
Yes.
And hence my question about the Sparks Farm, because they're being very cooperative as far as land is concerned, and they want to develop to the west of that road. That's where they want to put housing. And that was my question to Tim Carter when he was here, is why he hasn't looked at that piece of land and he thinks it's too difficult. So it all sort of, it works in, and I just wouldn't like to see us miss something.
It's a
I
question
could
of time. Sorry.
Sorry.
Yeah.
I just would like to add that there's also a Western Link that's already developed. So I see the Eastern Link as not any different to that. And I don't see the intensification occurring in those areas necessarily. That this is the key bus route and that is the key shopping area. So I'm quite happy with the recommendations, how they are. The Eastern Link is yet to be fully developed, but the Western Link is there and functioning well. And the PT futures of where the buses go within the township are yet to be decided.
Okay, so for today, you're pretty comfortable that we've got the areas that you would look at intensification in the long term identified?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I'm satisfied that it's on the record that I've raised it.
Yes. Okay.
So
yeah, I was looking at two people here. So
Sorry, I'm sitting behind the wrong person, aren't I?
Yeah.
I'm very comfortable. Also, the area that's shown for intensification is largely the older housing stock in Rangiora.
Yes.
The areas around the Western Link and the Eastern Link are more the newer housing stock, so you're less likely to see the change to intensification, with the exception of, I take your point about the Sparks land where it could potentially, because it's greenfield, become intense along that corridor, but to the north it's sort of already developed.
But we can't really pick that up because that's in process.
Yeah.
So we're dealing with the plan enabled areas now, not potential future that haven't been plan enabled. Is that fair? Okay. So look, I'm really clear because now I'm clear in my mind the difference between 2 and 14.
Yeah.
I do want to come back to for the panel anyway. We've got submissions saying the green belts, as shown, either aren't particularly accurate or aren't particularly helpful. Just trying to paraphrase.
Yeah. So just to add, so the at the end of page 58 of the I'm just trying to remember what it was, the officers' report, there was I mentioned that it's conceptual, and then officers have made a further recommendation to annotate maps 2 and 14, which we've just been discussing, so I won't point out where they are. That ecological enhancement in the green belt, the dashed lines are an approximate representation of the location of ecological enhancement. So there's a few instances where there's signaling that these green belt the green belt locations are indicative and it needs further detailed investigation. That's part of the joint work program for a blue-green network strategy with green belt investigation.
Okay, so these are your recommendations.
That's an existing recommendation.
Yeah, but the map hasn't caught up. Is that what we're saying?
Yeah, it has. I thought that's what you referred to, Mr. Chair, earlier, that the maps have been changed. So the map in front of you on the officer's marked up version has that annotation in the legend.
It's quite small.
Okay, there we go. Okay, there we go. Are the officers comfortable after hearing the evidence that these dashed greenbelt lines are in the right place? Speak for everyone. Sorry, I've missed Victoria's question over here too. Sorry.
It's not so much about whether they're in the right place. It's about people understanding that they are indicative and they're schematic. And I can't read what I've got in front of me. So I'd like you to specifically point out to me where it says that, so that there is no confusion for people. Because when I read on page 58, it says that there's more work yet to be undertaken. That's fine, but I'm not finding any reference in the substantive text to the fact that it's a schematic.
Kathy, could you just put the mouse over the ecological in the legend there? So that text underneath, it's very small, highlights that. Tammy, was there any other points in the recommendation to the actual body of the spatial plan?
So there's already under direction 3.5, which talks about exploring the opportunity of a green belt around the urban areas. The last paragraph there says the concept of a green belt needs to be explored in more detail and will be undertaken as part of the development of a blue-green network strategy.
I can see that, and I'm happy with that particular part of it, but I question whether it actually needs to go further and repeat similar language to what we've actually got in our maps. I don't think there's any harm in repeating it again for people, is my point. So the substantive text, I think, needs to marry it up with what we've got in our legend for the map.
Okay.
Is my thought on it.
So Liz, we should probably capture that as a deliberation point. Does the officer see any problem with consistency?
No, it's fine.
Yes. Grant.
Consistent. I just don't think there's any harm in spelling it out again.
Just for clarification, the green hatched areas, which the key identifies as future urban areas, they're actually already incorporated into the regional policy statement as identified urban spaces, aren't they? I'm looking.
Correct.
So I'm just wondering, for lack of to avoid confusion, should there be a little comment about future urban areas in the green hatched are actually already in the regional policy statement?
I mean, I guess this is just sort of stand alone in terms of the next generation of FDS and planning to indicate we've got an updated capacity assessment. Have we still got sufficient supply, and where will that go? And it's coincidence that it does happen to align with those, and we're able to show that with some accuracy. What they may be called or where they may be shown through implementation through the RPS may be something different.
Grant, are you saying that the green hatched area with a white background,
yep,
that's titled future urban area, those are taken from the current RPS?
Yep, is
that
yeah, that's correct. So the capacity assessment undertaking what is long-term capacity, factored in the growth of those areas as well, because they are planned. They're kind of like your board locations, which you have to do as well, to say that within that 30-year timeframe, those areas with the existing urban and increased intensification would meet the long-term capacity needs.
Understand that.
Yeah.
But would there be any harm in saying future urban area shown in 2013 RPS, or was it that's not really necessary?
I don't think it's harm. I don't think it's necessary. I'm thinking, it's looking forward, that we don't want to fall back to an existing necessary document.
But that's where they've come from, isn't it?
Well, yeah, they're not come from there. Yeah, they reflect that because that's where the capacity is. But I just feel it's. I don't think it'd be harmful, maybe for clarity, but we're thinking about going forward away from that. They're recognising that the RPS is going to be updated next year. It may not include a map A.
So this might be different, which
Yeah.
is we understand.
Yeah.
And we've heard the next version might be the next 3 years or 6 years at the most.
I think
notified in December next year, and then
I know,
an RMA process from there could take.
I'm talking about the spatial plan.
Oh, sorry. Next iteration, yeah, at very least will be reviewed in 3 years.
Well, we're dancing around on a pinhead, really, I think. We're dancing around on a pinhead in terms of things, but Nicole?
I just question referring to the RPS might get confusing, considering it's going through the whole process again next year.
Okay.
A year after, I just.
Yeah. Right, I think we're done on this question. Thank you. Well, Grant.
The Greenfield commentary and explanation. I think the explanation is really good in what the greenfield sites would mean, and that it's a conceptual thing. I don't, it would be I think it would be pretty difficult to argue that the space that's around the curve between that and existing is open for development. I think that wouldn't work. But have we've adequately accommodated the greenfield visioning, if you like, and have we done it in the joint work program? So that would be a non-statutory, potentially preliminary document, strategy.
How do you mean visioning? Sorry.
Well, that there is that it's explored further, so that further planning systems can take place at a later date, rather than sort of ad hoc within that space. There's a bit more development at a spatial level of what could happen within that space. How do we deal with that?
It's identified in the it's identified in the joint work program, I think might be the answer to your question, Grant.
Yeah, so that's in there already?
Yeah, so there's the blue-green network strategy, including green belt concept.
Okay.
Cool. Thank you. It's 10:35. Are we time for a break, Kathy? Is that what's, yeah. Let's have, sorry, is that the last questions?
Yeah.
On this question? Yeah. We'll break for 10 minutes or so. Be back at 10:45. I think we